Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I am Bruce Grant, the current Dean of the wonderful world of liberal studies at NYU. I see a lot of our students, our faculty, our staff. I'm really grateful to see all of you, other friends and colleagues. Let's smile at the very kind people who have provided a delicious buffet for us, who have been very kind. But also the many people who went into planning it, including our very own Dean Emerita, now among us, Julie Mostov, who is among the great minds to plan this year's annual lecture, which we're really proud to present. Most of you know that the world of liberal studies is a pretty special place. We're at a very big university in one of the best cities in the world, but that presents a lot of challenges for all the people in this room to stay human and keep talking, and that's what makes this world really valuable, I think, to me, to all of us. We're a liberal arts college at the heart of a very big place. We might not look like Amherst or Reed or Oberlin with 100 acres of botanical garden, but we're just as good. We've got amazing students, amazing faculty, and we're doing it in a way I think everyone knows well, that is a little different from your average place, right? We like to think of ourselves not just as interdisciplinary but, and very global, but the global isn't what it means at most places, right? We're not here to just say that you're checking a box and trying to become a better person by making, make sure you learn that language, make sure you travel, make sure it's an appreciation of the fact that the world is already global and we're already in it, meaning that it's already here. You don't have to go anywhere for it, right? It's a consciousness to appreciate that we're always already the product of huge forces that have been shaping the worlds in which we find ourselves. And that's New York City as much as anywhere. Even places that are, I always like to remind people that places we think of as remote, we only call that way because that's the past participle. What can I do except be a professor? That's the past participle of the verb to remove in Old English, right? If a place is called remote, it's been removed by someone else from a chain of wealth, from a chain of trade, right? And so the stories that we tell each other about the sweetness of rurality or the energy of a city, these are products of power and not in a way that we want to guilt each other out, but that we want to understand better so that we're smarter, so we act faster. And, there's a few problems in the world. And we're really glad to be part of those conversations. As we start, what's the best definition of global that I can give you is to remind you about, as all of us know, and not least because we've gathered here for this talk, that we're on particular lands, and we're really proud to always remind people about that. So I will start by saying that we're beginning our proceedings today by acknowledging that we're gathered, speaking, and learning on Lenape-Hoking, the ancestral lands of the Lenape peoples, which settlers, of course, like us today call New York City. We do this with humility and gratitude while recognizing the violence of forced relocation and displacement of the Lenape peoples, with whom this world of liberal studies, and the broader world of NYU are always in an ongoing process of learning. We don't want to stop there, right? Because calling them Lenape somehow fetishizes a particular attachment just to New York, right? These are peoples today known as the Delaware Nation, the Delaware Tribe, the Stockbridge-Munsee community, and the Munsee-Delaware Nation, spread across many different parts now, dispersed across many different parts of North America. We want to recognize that reparative action requires long-term maintenance and multi-generational efforts, that's all of us in this room, to build relationships with the sovereign nations of the Lenape peoples. We commit to upholding an ongoing and living set of commitments with these nations by working directly with tribal governments and authorized tribal representatives to ensure that our words and actions are in step with our goals. I'll stop there, but our speaker today couldn't be a better match to these questions of everything we hope for people to be thinking about in the world of liberal studies. So I'm going to stop now. You didn't come to see me, but I'm going to hand it over to my wonderful colleague, Leo Douglas, who will introduce our speaker. Please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good, this is working. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I was just commenting that at this point in the semester, to see a packed room is amazing. I am so thrilled to be here today. My name is Professor Leo Douglas. I've been here at NYU as full-time faculty since 2018. Oh my God, I can't believe that so much time has already gone. I was hired to teach environmental studies in liberal studies. My background is in ornithology, but I have a broad interest in people and how people live their lives and their connections to the natural world. And it is amazing to be in conversation with our guest today, who I met during the summer when I did not wear glasses. And here I am wearing glasses today. So that is an important marker in terms of, I feel that it has been a moment. Just before I get into introductions, I'm just going to remind us that you will notice that on your seats there are some cards. And as the evening progresses, we're going to encourage you to use those cards to document your thoughts, any questions that you would like to have passed back to the front of the room and shared with us, that we can add them to be part of the enriching discussion that we're about to have this evening. So welcome everybody again. All right, I won't forget to put these on. I'm still getting used to them. So it is my esteemed honor today to welcome and be in conversation with Sarah Zapata. Sarah was born in Texas and is a queer Peruvian-American textile artist based in Brooklyn. Welcome, Sarah. She has had solo exhibitions at Arizona State Museum, the Gallery Poggiali, if I pronounce that right?
Yeah, Poggiali in Milan.
Thank you. In Italy, the Kepler Museum of Contemporary Art in 2023 in Kansas, Missouri, among many others. Her work has also featured in solo presentations in London, Amsterdam, and at 5 New York-based museums over the last 2 years. Sarah's work has been prominently featured in various publications, including the New York Times, the New York Magazine, Architecture Digest, Artist, Elephant Magazine, Bomb Magazine, among many others. Sarah, I was very, very impressed by your bio, and again, thank you for coming. I'm going to hand over to Sarah to say a little bit more about herself, and also to just give us a general introduction to her artwork as well. Please join me, everybody, welcoming Sarah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Leo. Thank you, everyone here, and thank you all for being here. It's exciting to be with you all and be a part of what seems like such an incredible institution, and to really be shaping the future. I feel like that is really exciting. I think that's what we're all trying to do. And for me, I feel like I am always thinking about how the future is shaped by the past. And I feel like that's many people that I've talked to this evening. So I wanted to start with this work here. This was actually from 2016. So like I said, I work in textiles. I'm from Texas. My father is from Peru. I was a first-generation American. And then on the other side of my family is a white evangelical Christian family. So I felt like being both and neither at the same time. And for me, the way that that existed was through textiles. Obviously, Peru has this really incredible, rich history that exists within textiles, as well as there's biblical text that talks about how a woman is good, she works with her hands, she worships with wool. And so again, I think textiles felt like a way of being both and neither at the same time. And so I had studied weaving, and it really wasn't until I got to New York that I started working with like large-scale installations. When I was in Texas, I was always making large work. Space is not a currency like it is here. And so I kind of worked my way through how to really take up space. And that really came about with rugs. And so this was the first sort of installation that I did. This was in 2017. And so I really wanted to create work that people could exist within. I feel like I wanted to think about how to really shape space. I feel like architecture is something that's always invisibly sort of shaping how we exist together. And so this was in 2017, but it was really made right after Trump had gotten elected the first time. And so really the sentiment that everyone was feeling was just, how can we be together? And so that's really what led me to thinking about how the viewer can be a part of the work very physically. And so textiles are this really incredible material that literally every single human has a relationship to. And so I really wanted to think about how we can make culture accessible. I feel like so often we're thinking about, art and literature and thinking sometimes is only for the elite, when really it's for everyone. And so my job, I feel like as an artist, is to always get to the viewer as quickly and as succinctly as possible. And so perhaps that's through color, that's through material, it's through even just the physical presence of it. And so these sculptures are based off of the Paracas mummy bundles, which were this burial practice that was in southern Peru, where basically they would place the body into the natal position to create this idea of leaving and entering the world in the same way. And then they would place the body in a basket and then wrap the body with textiles. And actually the textiles that they used were ones that were made throughout this individual's life. So it was really thinking about textiles as documentation, as well as that means of care. And so on the inside of all of these sculptures, the base is a coiled basket that I made, and then the unseen element were these curved crosses that were made out of steel. And so there's two interpretations of a curved cross. One is that it's the mark of the beast. In Revelation, it talks about how the Antichrist will come with a curved cross staff. But there's also an interpretation that it represents the humility of Christ. And so I loved this really sort of duality that exists within this unseen element. And I think certainly I'm always trying to think about how the amount of labor always speaks to humility and honor. So from there, I really wanted to think about ruins, again, these pieces that are this sort of like in-between space. I feel like my work is very much about the in-between, which I feel like is also very relatable. I think there are certainly many people, many Americans especially, that come from different cultures, different families, and how to find that power of existing between two places or more at the same time. And so I wanted to think about these plinths as a navigation between the floor and the wall, and they really became these ruins. That's what I started to call them. And so they're modeled after these ruins that were in southern Peru at the ceremonial complex called Cahuachi, and there found buried was this like very large piece of cloth. It was, I believe, like 60 meters long. And this civilization was not thought to have been making cloth on the yard. So it's seen as this mystery, but more demonstrative of how this group of women worked together to achieve a singular goal. And so I really wanted to think about these pieces as well as how they're altars and the altar cloth and this traditionally the heart of the space, again, going back to liturgical architecture and how it's covered with an object that's traditionally made by women for a mostly male space. So again, this sort of push and pull within these spaces. And then from here as well, I was thinking about color and how to use color as to make the viewer move around the objects. Prior, I will be honest, the colors were all over the place. I was just fortunate enough to be working at a yarn company and they were just throwing yarn away. So it truly enabled me to work in a scale I never would have been able to afford. But it also was kind of, everything was very piecemeal. But it also, I think, was important to really celebrate this like very ridiculous material that is like hobby yarn. So really, after I'd sort of started working, I really wanted to separate what I had by colors and think about how to make the space sort of delineated by it. So these were really just, they're part of the Ruin series, but they were really seen as like a sketch. And then this was the last installation I did before the pandemic. This was at Performance Space New York, and this was an incredible activation for it. And if I'm talking too long, please. So working with a performance institution was just incredible. I feel like perhaps, 2019 flew too close to the sun. This was a very active space. So actually these ruins that I made were made for people to sit on, to perform on. There were community meetings, reading groups, performances, a lesbian Halloween party. Like it was a very active space. And so it was incredible to really think about how really these very intentional activations could be in this space. So with this work, I really wanted to think about, again, going back to power structures that exist within color. And so the first combination I thought of was just the ugliest that I could come up with, which was Christmas. And so I really wanted to think about where that came from. And it really was not solidified as this very specific language of Christmas until a very specific 1930s Coca-Cola ad. So something that's seen as very sacred, actually, of course, is tied to capitalism. And so I really wanted to think about these power structures, and I was worried it was going to be this Christmas nightmare, but thankfully it turned out to almost be this like Garden of Eden. And so it was really, I think, a really exciting project. So this was the first work that I did after the pandemic. And so as I had stated before, people could touch the work. I really wanted it to be active. I really wanted spaces to not just be this white wall, very sterile environment. And really after 2020, that felt like that wasn't safe anymore. And so this was the first work that I had done prior. This was a commission for this show at Brick in Brooklyn that was called Latinx Abstract. It brought together a lot of Latinx artists that were multi-generational, working within abstract works. And so I really went back to weaving. Weaving had always been, I think, my touchstone. But really, I didn't know what to do with it. And it really wasn't until this work that I was able to kind of figure things out. So striped cloth had been something that I had really been interested in, but this was the first time I really articulated it very specifically. there's biblical text that talks about how a cloth that's made of two is considered untrustworthy. And so from the medieval period onward, there's jesters, poor people, prostitutes that wore stripes. And from that lineage, we actually get the jail stripe as well as the American flag. And so I really wanted to think about, again, this power structure that existed within cloth, the strangeness that exists within the Bible, as well as sort of exemplifying the outlier, and to think about the power that exists within striped cloth. And so these were what I call gargoyles. Gargoyles obviously are part of a building. They're the literal throat of the building, which felt very prescient. We were all thinking about that. But you'll see they're hung about 9 feet above the ground, and then they're on a corner. So they're meant to exist in two places at the same time. And then this is really when I started to get more into stripes. This was actually in Lima. And this show was a failure. I feel like failure is something that I always talk to with students. I think failure is really important. And also, I think it kind of takes the pressure off. So often when you're showing work, it feels like everything has to be perfect, when really sometimes you need to see how things exist within a space. You need to see how to experiment publicly. And with this work, I had actually started it at the beginning of the pandemic. I was working in Lima, had gotten trapped there. The borders closed. I couldn't finish it. I didn't want to deal with it. And then was thankfully invited by this gallery, Crisis, that was like, no, you need to finish it. And so I was really able to work with myself in the past. So really these pieces that I had done prior, I started mixing them with the gargoyles. And so I thought of it as a way to exist and work with myself in the past, as well as it was a tumultuous time. And I feel like often I wanted the work to exist as, again, a space to commune, but also a means of fantasy. I feel like fantasy is so important, and thinking about how textiles can obviously articulate that. So then this is the next installation that I did. This was at the Kohler Arts Center. So this was actually a very giant installation where there were ruins that were on the ground as well as them mirrored above you. I wanted the work to actually watch you. This was very much a work about revelation and fear. I feel like as someone who was raised Christian, I still had a lot of trepidation with Revelation. It felt untouchable. And again, after the pandemic, I feel like fear was something that was coming up a lot. And so I really wanted there to be this sort of like ominous feeling within the work, as well as to lean into the strangeness. It's a book that's one that is very much about fantasy. It's not written by one of the disciples. It was written by a prisoner. And it also has a lot of like incongruencies. It talks a lot about color, and so I took colors out of them that were sort of opposite and then opposite on each side. So again, thinking about how power structures can really be articulated by color. So it really changed a lot while you were moving around and using the ruins with the gargoyles and really moving throughout the space. And then this is the work that was at the Kemper Museum, which was really wonderful. And we can talk about this one more. So I had the honor of working with the Kemper and really doing research in their archives. So I think you have some questions.
Yes. Actually, I'm going to ask you, Sarah, to actually go back to the one where the art is also on the wall. So everybody, Sarah and I met online over the summer, And I was completely intrigued by Sarah because in the ways that I felt like her story paralleled some of the stories that I'm interested in and my own lived experience. So, Sarah, you speak a lot about the book of Revelation in the Christian Bible. Revelation features very heavily in the lexicon of evangelicals in the United States and globally. I'm thinking about, the lake of fire in Revelation 21, the final torment of the devil, the beasts, and the prophets, heavy stuff, the God's wrath and the second death. Sarah, my dad had 3 churches, and there was a lot of talk about Revelation. How did you, going back to where we started, balance your upbringing, with Revelation? Your biography, you identify as queer. How do you balance that without self-hate, fear of ostracization? How do you find joy? Do you find joy in your art? I must say that the colors, the reds, I saw that so dominant, and I thought about Revelation a lot in your work.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wow. Where to start with that? I think certainly how I dealt with growing up, very much like that. I think I kind of just got to a point where I was running from what I came from, and you can run forever, but at the same time, I think that, you can't hide who you are. And so I think it was more so like meeting other queer people who came from evangelical backgrounds and talking to them. I feel like the commiseration and just like the constant feeling of like guilt and self-loathing is something that we would bond over. And I think really thinking about how to use that as power. And also, I think being critical of something does not mean you're being disrespectful. I think that that's also really important. And so coming from a means of sort of like understanding your demons and making peace with them, but then also like, how can this be used in a positive way? And I think that that's always how I was trying to view my work. I think it's never from a means of disrespect. I feel like I've earned my way of being critical from it. I'm strangely protective of Christianity, because if you didn't grow up in it and you're just critical of it, it's very easy to poke holes. But once you're in it, I think there's things that are different from it,
Yeah, I think that's so relatable. I think of my own story, because I also identify as gay and as queer. I remember watching, I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Doubt, but there's a scene where there's this little black boy and he's in church. Yeah. And he's not listening to what's happening in church. He's watching all the doves fly. Yeah. And, it's very symbolic in terms of that's kind of a reason why, there is some doubt, like, what's going on and stuff like that. I study birds, and I wasn't going to give that up for anything. You're not going to give up your art. I saw all the colors in your art. I'm like, oh my God, that's so gay. It's so LS. We're going to have an amazing time.
Yeah, definitely. Also, too, I think that that's what's so important. I think I was thinking about this and your love of birds and then my love of textiles. But it's interesting, I think, the more I research into textiles, it teaches you more about people. And I would imagine the more you research about birds, it tells you more about people.
Totally. Absolutely. There is a quote that I found in Forbes magazine that I would like to read. Zapata's art practice explores ideas of identity, community, lineage, counterculture, histories of resistance. She combines familiar materials such as acrylic yarn, natural fibers, and traditional textiles art form to express the intersection of her plural identities. The daughter of a Peruvian immigrant, a first-generation American born in Texas, a queer woman raised in an evangelical household. How do you feel, Zapata, in terms of the messaging in terms of your artwork? What type of space are you trying to create, or are you trying to create a space for plurality? Speak a little bit more. You mentioned that in when you were talking about individual pieces, but say a little bit more in terms of like, you know, space making and community making and all of that, belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's always what I'm trying to think about. I'm not unusual, and I know that. And so I think that I want to open the door for more artists that come from these backgrounds that are first generation or immigrants or queer, that work with craft mediums. I think the list goes on. And I think it's also important to note too, I'm certainly not the first. And there were always artists of color, there were always craft artists, there were always queer artists that were working before, and you know, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And I think people love to feel like they discover something when we know that these people, these humans, have always been working within these mediums. So as much as I'm thankful to be here, I hope that I'm bringing many, many with me.
Sarah, tell me a little bit about how you think about identity and privilege. Specifically, you know, I recognize that my own privilege. You know, I have been able to live outside of my home country of Jamaica. I live in a city where I don't have to worry about walking around with a husband and two kids. I feel privileged to tell my story. That's not everybody's experience right now, especially this time, this moment we're having as a nation in this country. How do you continue to think about, you know, your privilege and using that privilege to tell a story? And what other stories, if you want to share, do you want to continue to tell in your work?
Yeah, I think such a good, important thing that I feel like we're always thinking about. Certainly the privilege of being an American citizen, like that's huge. The privilege of being like a lighter skinned person, absolutely. I completely know that. And I think that privilege isn't inherently bad, because it's something that you cannot help having, but it's what you use with that, what you do with it. So again, it's how you work with communities to help them do the work that they want to do. I feel like that's always important in who you're building your community around. And I feel like that's what I always try and think about, and also talk to students about, is like, you know, we don't exist within this microcosm. It's actually, culture does affect change. Otherwise, they wouldn't be coming for us. And they are.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Could you go back to the artwork where there's a piece on the wall?
The first one?
No. The one of the last ones you showed where, yes, this one. So, you know, full disclosure, everybody, I did see the art pieces before, so I had a chance to think about them a bit. But, you know, when I saw this piece, Sarah, I thought about the Netflix series Stranger Things.
Full disclosure, I have not seen it, but I'm familiar.
Okay, no worries. Because well, it's hard since you haven't seen it. But there is this what's called the upside down space.
Yes.
So the upside down space, you know, is this place in which there is this kind of mirror in terms of what reality. It's kind of an alternative reality, so to speak. But in this upside down space, you know, this alternate dimension, there is darkness. It kind of mirrors the world. It's about beauty, but it's a lot about decay and rot and these hostile creatures. You know, so I heard you speak about, you know, the gargoyles and the funeral rites and stuff like that. And feel free to knock me back into my space.
Yeah, no.
But I also wondered, you know, as you spoke about this kind of duality and in between space, so to speak, how you continue to kind of process this and bring this forward into your work. Are you inviting others into that in-between space? What are they going to find there?
Ooh, such a good question. Yes, I'm certainly inviting everyone into the in-between. I feel like that feels the most, I keep saying powerful, but
Real.
I mean, if real is true, yes. Because it's certainly, I don't know if y'all feel this, but I certainly right now, like, I feel like we're on the precipice of something. And I hope it's the precipice of, the upward swing. I hope, it's not the other way. But certainly it feels like we're like, it's edge of the earth, like nothing feels sort of solid. And I feel like that precariousness is very dangerous. And I feel like that's the whole point of the distraction of these smaller arcs. So if we can feel more comfortable in this precarity, or not more comfortable, more powerful within this precarity, in this in-between, that's how we're able to hopefully drive the car to where we want to go. So certainly, I think that that's what I'm trying to access. And I think, too, I always think about it in terms of time. I feel like, again, to know where we're going forward, I feel like I'm always looking backwards. But I feel like that's how we keep time to be this like very powerful cyclical thing of literally learning where we've been to know where we're going to go.
I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. So going back to, as I said, I was hired to teach environmental studies. Every semester, I take my students out. We walk into the city and we go to different manufacturing houses. This semester, we looked at the Swedish brand Fjällräven. We spoke about where wool comes from, where does that hide come from, what does the longevity of clothes mean, what does dyeing fabrics mean, what are the social implications and costs of looking fine. Because beauty does have its costs. So could you speak a little bit in terms of how you think about the connections between fabric and yarn and, things that we care about, my students care about, pollution, women's work and who is being exposed to pollutants in this journey that things make before we get to see them, wear them, experience them here in New York.
Yeah, no, I think that that's so important. And I've certainly really thought about that as my practice has expanded. As I had said, when I first started out, I was just getting everything that was given to me. And so I've tried to really carry that sensibility to now where I use everything is secondhand. There's so much material that's available. The only thing that I cannot is the warp. The warp are the strands that go onto the loom, and so they have to be a specific strength. But everything else is recycled. I've gotten crazy stuff from stores that I order from or when I've done residencies. So I feel like it's important to really honor the material. Again, going back to honor, I feel like that's how I want to think about the material as well as the techniques. So often now I feel like textiles are just disposable and anonymous. And so I feel like I'm trying to work against that. And I think that that's also important of seeing textile works like this. Perhaps a viewer who has no understanding of textiles will be like, oh, this is something different. This is beautiful. This is architectural. It's not just clothing. So to think about this material, the longevity, the importance and tradition of it. So certainly I think that it's a complicated industry. I feel like we can't escape late stage capitalism for sure. But how to honor it as much as possible is always what I'm trying to think. Even in all of these sculptures now, I save everything. I've become a very crazy person where if it can be nothing else, at least it's stuffing. So in all of these sculptures now, there's very personal items. There's just the leftover warps. There's very specifically everything is saved. My poor wife is police, can I just throw this sock out? And I say no, because it needs to be saved. And I always it becomes part of the life of the work.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I'd like to speak about an artist whose work we know she's from my home country. I think the slide is at the very end. If we can get to that one. Let's see. Okay, so Ebony Patterson, this is actually from her 2023 exhibition here in New York at the New York Botanical Gardens. And she's blending textiles, working with textiles and vultures, and she's placing them within a very Victorian space. The title of her exhibition was Things Come to Thrive, to Shed, to Molt. The New York Times described it as a wall of fester that includes hanging textiles, plastic insects, and gilded spines, as in spinal cords. I'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts. I don't know if you actually did you see the exhibition?
I didn't get to see it in person, but it's important, incredible.
Yes, I'd love to find out, how you think that it intersects with your work and the themes, and also, she's trying to deliberately use vultures to kind of problematize, what we see as beauty and elite. Yes,
I mean, I think from that article, she said, within the ugliness, there is so much beauty. And I loved seeing how she used the scavenger and to really think about the importance of the scavenger, that they're everywhere, this really incredible part of our ecosystem, of our world. And I think that also transcends to her textiles as well. And also what I love about hers is they're so different from mine and from other artists as well. I feel like what I love about textiles is their testament to place. So much so, even if it becomes something that is so much of fantasy and someone else's voice. But I think that she had this really beautiful way, too, of using, again, material culture and objects. And in one of the rooms, she had, I think, casts of feet. And so it was talking about the enslavement that was there and how this history is always surrounding us, but yet it's still very beautiful. And I think that the reverse is true, too. Like, in the beauty, there is also so much ugliness. And I think acknowledging both parts of that, I think, are so important to where we're at. It's not about saying it's just beauty or beautiful and it's ugly. It's about both can be true, and that's where we're at.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's also finding beauty in the face of ugliness. Finding that joy, in times when there's a lot to be sad about, so to speak, but, finding a space for joy and community and togetherness. Look at us.
Yeah, look at us now.
I have one more question before we invite questions from our audience. And when we met online, Sarah, and today you mentioned very prominently the notion of women's work. And I want to talk a little bit more about this. This is something that I've thought about quite a bit in the last 2 to 3 years. 3 years ago, I decided to do a documentary and an art installation as a curator. And it was about my mother, a woman that I knew very well and that I loved. Even that was the case, I still ended up hiring a consultant, a Black African woman, to help me to deconstruct the blackness and also the male gaze. Because, there is a way in which privilege and our own privilege sometimes sneaks up on us. I really like the fact, that you spoke to me earlier on as we met during the summer about women. How are you thinking about the journeys, past and present, of women? define for us when you say women's work and how it relates to your pieces, your exhibitions. What are you saying implicitly and explicitly about women and the work of women?
Yes, I mean, so important. I think traditionally women's work, capital WW, it's the crafts. And I think that that is certainly very important. It's certainly how I'm thinking about women's work, but I think that's just the beginning of it. The way that I like to think about textiles is how they were used in these civilizations by these communities of women. So thinking about textiles as documents, thinking about how these textiles were also symptomatic of commerce and these really incredible workshops that were going on. There are some archaeologists that date some of these textiles, or not date, but estimate that a single cloth would take about 20,000 hours of work because it would be woven and the yarn would be spun, it would dyed and embroidered. And so I think that thinking about these incredible lineages and how that can be taken into something that is abstract, it is contemporary, I think that that's also how I'm thinking about those objects. I feel like some of my most favorite abstract work are works that I've seen that were pre-Incan. And so I think it's all about these materials and how they communicate with one another, but not about copying them. And again, I think something that is seen as perhaps more diminutive and quiet, I want to think about how these techniques and materials can take up as much space as possible to the point where they are the space. And so I think that that's really how I like to think about it, but it's also this incredible like life's investigation with these things. I feel like just as we were saying, like every part of the world has their own textiles. Every family has their own techniques that they would do. And so I think that it's at once very personal, but also testament to just the human experience and to women's experience as well.
Thank you. And I really valued seeing some behind the scenes pictures as well, because you must take days, hours, weeks actually creating some, like forgot what it's called, the actual weaving machine. What do they call that?
Looms, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
it's huge.
There's a saying, I feel like I say this all the time, but it's important. Like, weavers don't have clocks, they have calendars. And it's very true. I feel like weaving is very much about time, but I think that that's also important. Everything is so instant now, and so it's like, what does it feel like when there's literally just time almost as a material within it?
Thank you. We'd love to take some questions for Sarah. If you don't mind standing as well, because I can actually see you. Oh, the mic, it's not on?
Thanks so much for speaking. I think something that really stood out to me was the use of titles, especially as an artist. I feel like that's kind of just giving a little look into what the viewers can see. I feel like it's very tedious and it's very important. So how did you decide on the titles of your work? Because a lot of them stood out to me. What was the process behind that? The question was about titles and how I arrive at them. Thank you for the question. I love it. I honestly love titles. And I think it goes back to, I love like fantasy. And even before I was making physical work, when I first moved to New York and the only thing that I was doing really was like writing lesbian like foot erotica. Because it was a way, feet are a common archetype in the Bible. So it was like using like a lot of where I'd come from as well as like where I was going and being an out person for the first time. But this writing practice enabled me to use a sense of fantasy that I couldn't physically make. And so I really began my love of writing. And so usually there's writing that goes along with every work. And I like to like collect words like that I hear around, and then we'll put them in my sketchbooks or in my phone. And I think language is just so beautiful, and I love it so much. And I think it just feels like a way again to get the viewer just even deeper. And it also is like, from just a very practical standpoint, like as an artist, you have to title all the time. So you might as well just like get a good like understanding of it, of like how you want these works to be perceived. Because a lot of times like the title is the first entry point to your viewer without even ever seeing the work.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question. I believe this one is maybe from the front row. How do your materials connect you back to nature, and have you ever worked with hemp?
Very good question. So certainly complicated, how it connects me to nature. I think certainly I'm really interested in geology right now, which I guess perhaps is a component of nature. I think I really had been interested in, again, we're in this concept of time and land and this ever-changing portion. I think a fact that really let me onto this journey was that there's marine limestone at the top of Mount Everest. And so thinking about this constant like cycling of land, and really as humans, we have no concept of time because we're so minuscule. And in some way that made me feel more comforted. So certainly I think that I've been thinking about space as it relates to geology and relates to land. And I have worked with some hemp. Hemp is an annoying thing to weave with. It's very, like you have to like wet it. But it also, hemp is incredible. Linen and hemp, I believe, are the most sustainable fibers, and they're both not the most fun to weave with, but also incredible materials. Complicated.
And isn't hemp tend to be kind of is it a kind of a rough fiber as well?
It can be, yeah. But if it's thin enough, then it's also, it's something else. But I'm also no expert. I feel like I've like developed a lot of bad weaving habits over the years.
Please tell us more about how and why you felt that your 2021 show was a failure. And there is a comment, the installation was beautiful. Tell us a little bit more about failure and why you felt it was a failure. Did everybody else think it was a failure? Or?
No, I mean, it's such a good, thank you for the question. I'll go back to it. So usually when I do these talks for students, like I will fully show what it was before. Like one of the works, it was like the first Ruin series, if y'all can remember. I showed that at Boston University and it was an absolute mess. I was like, those photos are like buried deep in the archive. But I show it just because it's important, and it was an important lineage as part of that work. With this work, basically, so it had been like a lifelong dream to do a show in Lima, and I had been there for a month. I was working with Museo Mate, which was a museum out there. March 15th happened. They were like, oh, we're just gonna close for a week. Like, obviously we know the rest of the story. And I suddenly had so much time on my hands, but no materials. In Peru, it was very intense. Like, they closed the borders. You weren't allowed to leave your house. There were curfews. Only like grocery stores, banks, and pharmacies were open. By the time like I was able to come back to the US, like I had to get government documentation to fly out of the Air Force base. And it was just crazy and intense. And so it was just sort of this work that I did what I could, but it was just a mess. I hated it. It was just all of these rocks. There are these rocks that are in southern Peru that are in Sacsayhuaman that were these huge rocks that are like some like almost as big as like these sections. And so they're considered almost like these magical rocks that the Spaniards couldn't destroy. They had started trying to harvest some of them to build cathedrals, and then some of them just literally were too large for them to even move. And so I wanted to think about these rocks as again, this incredible erasure and power within this land. But it was just a mess. So this work, literally, the museum ended up closing. They installed it. I got images from it, but it just kind of was stuck there for a year. And so I really didn't want to deal with it. And so it just felt a mess. But thankfully, it survived.
Well, it's beautiful. I had just one follow-up question about this, which could be completely me, just like seeing things in the artwork. Was there, is the green related to jade, or something in terms of jade, in terms of burial practices or in indigenous cultures, or?
Actually, so jade is a very good question. So in Cusco, there's like a rainbow flag that it looks similar to the like rainbow queer flag, but the difference is that they have a teal. And so Peru is a complicated place. They still have not passed gay marriage. There's still quite a few issues there. And so I wanted to highlight the color that was the one outlier within it. And then the purple was just the opposite, I believe. I forget. There was some specific reason for the purple, but it escapes me.
Thank you. This question I really like, because I think about this too. What would you say to people who don't consider themselves to be artists on how to make art to express identity and to show the world around us? Culture is so important in in this time. How can we do our part culturally and learn how to express ourselves?
That's such a good question. Thank you for that. And yeah, I think the most important thing is to think about what you want to talk about. I think it goes back to this adage that you really can't teach people how to make work. Because I feel like if you're an artist, you're going to do it, but you can equip yourself with the means of creating objects, if that's what you're interested in. I feel like obviously for me, it very much was about textiles and weaving, and I don't know who I would be without having learned how to weave. But I think that really it's about indulging what you're attracted to and how you want this work to exist. I think certainly when I first moved to New York and I just went to a state school in Texas and I was just, this little pissant from Texas who had nothing. And so I was almost ashamed to work in textiles. I didn't know anyone who was doing that. But once I kind of stopped running from who I was, I feel like that's really when everything changed. And I'm a firm believer that that's really how you take ownership of your trajectory and through life, because I feel like people are always attracted to authenticity. So just because you're making work doesn't mean it has to be this like incredible whatever. I think it's all about the lineage of what you're wanting to create and how that leads you to other people and vice versa.
Powerful. I also think about this question as well because, deciding to be an ornithologist, in a very traditional conservation department was also a commitment to do what society thinks of as very boring work, like journal articles. Like nobody in my home country has read anything that I've written, believe me. So to your point and going back to the question, it's also led me to think about other modes, So here I am now thinking of myself, I'm not just an ornithologist, I'm actually a documentary maker. Yes. Because in terms of visualizing that work. So I'm just using this to kind of, also expand what we think in terms of art or an art form. That could be music or...
Absolutely. I think that it's like there's a lot of pressure in the art world and in art education that if you're a painter, you only make paintings. And I absolutely disagree with that. I think as long as it's your mind, however that is manifested physically, it's always going to make sense. I think it's important to indulge these different means of expression.
Going off of that, Sarah, how would you advise our students, our community, anybody who is interested in art in terms of specifically as a career? You know, when I think of an artist, you know, said I have 2 kids, you know, I'll tell you this, you'll appreciate this. So, with both of our kids, when they were a certain age, they're still at the creeping stage. There's a tradition, my significant other is Chinese, that you put out these objects on the ground, and, you know, the one that the baby picks up that's what they're going to be in life. So, you know, we had the various objects, and to my great horror, my daughter picked up the art one. I was like, oh my God, let's stop. Okay, let's just stop here. We'll put these again in a different order. Let's just be sure. You know, because, you know, we've heard the stories of the starving artists. And, you know, it's hard not to be, you know, I'm saying this in jest, obviously, but concerned, especially when we're talking about minoritized groups, you know, people of color, people who are members of the LGBTQ community, women, those who bring the intersectionality of all of those things. You know, what am I doing in terms of committing them to, like, you know, go be an artist? You know, am I being irresponsible? Or am I giving my children or whoever it is I'm advising here at NYU, you know, the power to go and change the world? So kind of with that backdrop, you know, as you advise our students, you know, again, thinking about the diversity, which is New York, the diversity, which is liberal studies, you know, what advice do you give them in this capitalist world in terms of, you know, what does it mean to be an artist, really?
I mean, so important. I feel like it's all about building your community. Number one, build your support system. Surround yourself with people that are doing exciting things, that you dream together, that you work together. I feel like that can be the most important fuel and can feed you in ways that I feel like are hard to articulate. And then 2, of course, like, get a job. Like, I'll be honest, like, I had a job and I still do other work all the time, like teach, freelance. It's always a hustle. So I think too, don't get lost in the wrong fantasy that, like, it's all my thoughts and my ideas. I feel like it is work, but I think, again, it's all about seeing what you want out in the world, but then how to also practically take care of yourself. And don't get lost by thinking, oh, if I work at a museum, then I can be an artist. Sometimes being adjacent to what you want to do is going to distract you from what you want to do. Sometimes it's important to have a job elsewhere where you can just like check out, clock out at 5, and then you're at your studio for a couple of hours. But again, I think that's my advice. I feel like what is so incredible about the art world is that there's not one path. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to have the pedigree from an Ivy League. I think that you really can make it your own way as long as you have your clarity of voice, you have your community around you, and then also your bills are paid as well.
Which goes back to one of the questions that we received as well. How do you deal with burnout?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I mean, you know, full disclosure, I'm a Capricorn, so like, I feel like even when I was a kid, like all I wanted to was to have my job. And so certainly burnout exists. And if I'm honest, I feel like hobbies, and then again, going back to community. If you have your community that's there to take care of you, that's there to like go out and get a martini, like, or go out and have a vacation. I think it's about having both. A good friend of mine who's a very successful artist, also a Capricorn, he had said that you have to realize that there's a ceiling of happiness that your work will provide you. So understand that it's about wanting what you want for yourself, but also like building around love and joy and happiness. And I feel like, again, if you have that support, I feel like you know when to take breaks and then when to go back. And hobbies. I'm a big hobby person.
This question says, your evangelical background seemed to have been an important part of your art process. The esoteric myths in particular seem to have shaped your ideas. Do you think you've arrived at a different kind of spirituality, one that is more indigenously oriented, as your journey has continued?
Such a good question. I think certainly. I feel, I am certainly not a spiritual person, but I do believe, I'm a superstitious person. I don't think that's the same thing, but maybe that's semantics. But I do think, again, spirituality is so important, and I find it so interesting and so beautiful. And there's an inextricable connection with textiles. And so certainly I feel like that's very exciting. And again, going back to what I was saying of how learning about textiles teaches me more about people. And I feel like the people from these communities were extremely interesting. And something I've been thinking about a lot is that a lot of these civilizations literally would commune with the earth, and like mountains would be a part of their community. Like glaciers were considered upper class. They were living with the earth in ways that I feel like are completely different from how we are. So even just seeing that existence and different modes of existence, I think is so interesting and important.
Okay, we're getting to our last two questions, Sarah. But on the last point that you noted, for me, I feel that with time I have become, perhaps to your point, less spiritual, at least in the traditional sense. Yeah. But you know what I miss? I miss a sense of community that I had. It's been my life, since I knew myself. Yeah. I miss those bonds. How do you continue to kind of process the inherent separation that sometimes happens?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And perhaps I think, again, pointing to why I love installation. It's whether, you think it's a community or not, maybe it's just a commune of people together. And I love being able to build that. So perhaps maybe that's what I'm trying to do. And this is helping me realize that is how to take world building to a very physical level that then takes it to a critical and theoretical level and something else. So I think we're humans, we naturally want to be around other humans that are like-minded. And so I think that that's what I'm always trying to build, physically and visually.
Finally, Sarah, could you share with us, for those of us who would like to see your work, either in the greater New York area or beyond, where can we find your work either now or in the next few months?
Yes, so I have I'm in a group show that opens on Thursday at...
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a textile show. Oh, y'all are so sweet. It's a textile show that also would be really interesting. It's like a post-Annie Albers situation, which I feel like would be interesting. That opens on Thursday. And then there's this archive that just opened downtown. It's called Library 180. Highly suggest y'all go. It's like huge volumes of magazines. It's free to go. You just get an appointment. There's a group show there, and also suggest visiting the archive. And then there's some other shows coming up. I can't think, but also Buffalo AKG Museum. There's a big survey of Latinx painters that's opening next year. Don't know why I'm with painters, but I'm down.
Everybody, please join me in congratulating and thanking Sarah. And thanks to all our guests, including those who are not only in the room but are on Zoom. This evening, our co-sponsors included the Division of University Life and the Women's Leadership Forum. Thanks to Dean Bruce Grant and the entire LS Dean's Office team for making this the success it was. And thanks to Jean Julie Mostoff, who actually planted the seeds that we're enjoying today. Thank you. So great to see you, Dean Mostoff. I cannot tell you. I can't put it into words. Thanks also to the NYU catering, the tech, facilities, captioning, and the campus staff. Everybody, please don't let that food go to waste. Please join us over by the food.
And thank you, Leo.
Thank you. Amazing.